Everybody, welcome to our solution showcase on COVID-19 tracking and self-certification workflows. We're so excited to have you. My name is Megan. I'm with the frevvo customer success team. Also on the line, I've got Ashish, and he'll be helping us to answer questions throughout. So let's dive right in. We're going to give you a quick overview of frevvo, and then we'll dive into a demo of how to build a brand new workflow live, and we'll show you several COVID-19 related workflow templates that you're going to actually have access to after the webinar. In case you want to use them in your own business. At any point during the webinar, you can type a question into the questions panel, and Ashish will answer it, or we may answer them live as well. All right, I'm getting a little bit of background, Ashish. Do you want to mute? Okay. Awesome. Let's dive right into our material. So if you're not familiar with frevvo, we are a simple visual workflow software. We help the customers that work with us digitize their everyday admin tasks. We've got hundreds of customers, have built thousands of workflows. And the best part about it is you really don't need an IT department. You don't need to know any coding at all. If you can use a product like Excel, you can easily use frevvo to automate your workflow processes. We have lots of different customers across a number of different verticals. You're probably seeing some familiar names on the screen right now, and it just goes to show that frevvo has such a myriad of uses, across industries. Our customers are using frevvo to automate processes like HR processes, purchase orders, invoice approvals, and today we're going to be showing you how you can use these to automate even those processes that hopefully come up once in a lifetime, like pandemic management processes. So we are going to be showing you some, oh, sorry, this slide's a little funny. 1 second. Just going to reload this page. There we go. There we go. That looks a little better. So we offer complete enterprise grade features, and you see them, a number of them listed on the screen. Today, we're really going to be calling out our no-code drag and drop workflow design, how quick and easy it is to design workflows as new business needs come up. We'll show you how you can add custom logic to those forms, again, with point and click tools, very simple. And we'll show you that your forms are going to be automatically mobile friendly and work on all of your devices. And we'll talk a little bit about legally binding electronic signatures as well, which are just a good to have feature there when you're doing this type of workflow. Now, one of the cool things about frevvo is that we offer many free templates. So you don't even have to build a workflow from scratch like we're going to do today. You can start from one of our templates and just customize it, which makes designing that workflow and getting it into production and getting your users access to it faster than ever. You can have workflows built in just a matter of minutes, really. If you do decide you want to build from scratch, or if you're editing a template, you can use our drag and drop workflow designers that make it very, very easy to design your forms, a nice visual user interface. And we also have a user interface for the custom logic. So you don't have to know any code at all in order to make your forms really dynamic and responsive. So this combination of factors is really perfect when you have to make a fast new change to your process because of something like, pandemic protocol changes or other business requirement changes. So today we're going to build a workflow, imagining the scenario, which is actually quite true for many of us these days, which is many companies are being asked to implement vaccine mandates for return to the office. So we need a form so that our employees can let us know if they're vaccinated or not. We want to make this as easy as possible for the employee because, we all know nobody has time for one more thing. So we want to make minimal data entry. We want to give them the option to upload their vaccine card, maybe even take a picture of it with their phone and upload it. We want to make sure there's an additional review process just in case someone reports an unvaccinated status. And we want to make sure the user gets copies of their request and notification when it's approved. And of course, on top of all of that, we want to make sure that the whole process is secure because we are dealing with our employees' personal information. So the good news about frevvo is that we have built-in rock-solid security. You can use your existing authentication systems for your users to access these forms. We support strong passwords with configurable expiration dates. Everything is encrypted. You can even refine the access control to things like submissions for each form and workflow. So you can dictate that by form or workflow. We have a built-in audit trail so you can see exactly what happened and who touched and accessed every form. And you can also install frevvo on-premise if you need added security for HIPAA compliance. And then, of course, we have data protection, GDPR compliance, all of that built right in. All right, so let's dive into the demo, and let's what we're going to do is create a workflow live that meets all the business requirements we just talked about. So we'll come over here to frevvo. This is the designer view of our product. I'm actually right here in the designer homepage. And I'm going to go into our solution showcase project where later we'll show you a number of other forms and workflows that you might want to use to manage pandemic processes in your business. But for now, we're going to build a brand new workflow to gather proof of vaccination. So all I have to do here is click create a new workflow, and this launches our workflow design wizard. So I'm going to give it a name. Call it proof of vaccine demo, and I can give it a description. Maybe I want to use some keywords, whatever you think you might want to search for later. Once you have dozens or hundreds of forms and workflows, these keywords and names can be really important in helping you locate those when you want to edit or update them. Then we'll click next, and now we're able to configure the steps of our workflow and who they're assigned to. So the first step, I'm just going to name this proof of vaccination, and we'll let frevvo create a new form for us. And frevvo will actually build us a form that has a few commonly used controls already. Save us a little bit of time on that. The next step, we'll call this vaccination review, which means like if someone's not vaccinated, they need to do this extra review step. And this is going to be an approval step. So it'll be a carbon copy essentially of our original form that has an additional section on it where the approver can sign. And we have some options for how we want to assign this step, who should perform it. I can assign it to an email or to a user in my tenant, my frevvo tenant, or to a role, which would be a group of users. For today, I'm just going to assign each step to myself, which will make it a little bit easier to demo, but you can easily configure this however you would like. And you can always change it later again with using point and click tools. And the third step will just be a regular approval for all of the submissions to go through, and we'll click finish. So just that easy, in literally less than a minute, I've created a workflow, and it has these 3 steps. If I click into any of the steps, I can see it's assigned just as I dictated, and frevvo's even built in some little bit of customization for the task notification email that this user will get. If we go into the form, we'll notice that frevvo automatically created several fields for us. We have the user's information, and we also have these approval sections for the approvers to sign. Now, these approval sections, I just want to point out, are digitally signed sections. So you can see on the security tab on the left side of my screen, we have a text signature image. You could also use a wet signature if you wanted to gather a signature drawing. And this is going to be a legally binding encrypted digital signature. So once the user clicks sign this section, then it's going to lock down all the data within that section and prevent the form from being tampered with at that point. So this is a great tool that, you know, every workflow, almost every workflow I can think of uses a signature in one form or another, so we can make sure that our forms are meeting all the legal requirements. And then if we look over into rules, we'll actually see a number of business rules already created for us, such as this one, which is using business logic to automatically gather the user's information, their first name, last name, manager, and email, and automatically set the date. So again, we're really minimizing the amount of work the user has to do, the amount of data they have to enter. Basically, if we already know that data somewhere in our system, we're going to populate it on the form for you when you perform it. So let's come over and make a few edits to this workflow to really customize it for our business needs. So the first thing I like to do, which I think is a fun thing as well, is I want to put our logo on the form. So I can grab a control from the palette of controls over here just by clicking it. And in this case, I'll grab an image control. And I can just drag and drop that anywhere on my form. I can also customize how wide it is, so kind of the layout of the form. And then I can choose a file right off of my computer. Let's see, I think we want to go into pictures here and grab a logo and upload that image. And then that's going to show right on my form, a nice little logo there. So we'll do the same drag and drop mode to put a title on our form. And for this, I'm going to use the frevvo message control. Now, the message control is a read-only control. So this allows you to do read-only text on your form. You can type the text right into this message property with HTML markup, or what I like to do is turn on the rich text editor and go ahead and edit it in this little mini word processor we have here. So we'll say proof of vaccination workflow. We can adjust the size of this and even the color, kind of anything you want. And there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do here. You can add a link, an image. We could add a horizontal line underneath. You know, lots of great options that you can do there. So we'll go ahead and we'll add that. Now it looks a little funny with this blue background. I can change that. That's just our default message type. So we'll switch that to none so that it doesn't have any background, and then we'll center it on the page. So that looks pretty nice. Now, the next thing we want to do is start customizing some of the fields in here. This first section that says my items, we just want to rename that to employee information. Now, the label of any control is what the user is going to see. So as soon as I click tab, you'll see that the label here on this section changes to employee information. The name of the control is really the value, or the not value, but the property that we use behind the scenes when we're writing a business rule about it or mapping it to a PDF. I'm going to leave that the same because I know there's a business rule written on this section and I don't want to have to change it later. But you could change that, and it's pretty easy to change your business rules if you needed to. We're also going to delete this message control. This is just a built-in message letting us know that these controls were created for us. And I'm going to delete this signature. Now, this is a little bit of a different type of signature. This is what we call a signature from palette, which is a control you can pull into your form. And this would allow an anonymous user, someone who was not logged in, to sign your form. We don't really need this first step to be signed, so we'll just delete that for today. So the next thing we want to do is we want users to be able to indicate their vaccination status. So for that, we'll use a drop-down menu. So I'm going to grab the drop-down type control from my palette, and we'll plop it right down here on our form. We'll give it a label and a name. And we will set the options. So when you set options for a selection control, like a drop-down, you can set them statically right here in frevvo just by typing them in. We use a special syntax, which is value on the left, = label on the right. So the label on the right is what the user will see when they click the drop-down menu. The value on the left is what the value that's actually passed through the submission document. In this case, they're the same. In a lot of cases, that's true, but they could be different if you needed them to be. Now you also have option to pull your drop-down options from a web service. So you could dynamically pull options from your database or from Google, Google Sheet, I should say, and have a dynamic set of options here, which is another very common scenario. So we'll also make this control required. We want to make sure the user has to fill that in order to submit the form. And I think that's all we need to do for that employee information section. Now we want to add a section where the user can enter details about their vaccination. So what we're going to do is pull in a section control, which is really just a control that allows us to group other controls together. And what you'll see later is that we'll be able to write a business rule to either show or hide this entire section based on the vaccination status. And in here, we're going to use another selection control. This one is a radio, which is in a way similar to dropdown. It's a single select control, but this one will show us both of the options right on screen versus inside of a menu. And we'll set the options in a similar way. Now with the radio control, since the options are on screen, one thing we may want to do is set the item width to make them horizontal. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. And then we'll require that as well. And let's add 3 date controls. So we'll do date of first dose. And for this one, let's set it to required. And then let's add 2 more date controls for date of second dose and booster. Now these we're going to show and hide dynamically using business rules in just a few moments. But the other thing we may want to do here is add some information. Maybe someone has a first dose, but their second dose is still scheduled. So what we could do here is put a little help text, letting them know, if this is scheduled, enter the date it's scheduled for. And what that does is it puts a little information icon. The user can pop up this little help bubble. Okay, we'll do one more. And notice I made those 2 optional, so the user doesn't necessarily have to fill those in. That's fine. Now, we also want the user to be able to upload a copy of their vaccination card. So for that, we have a control called upload, appropriately named. We'll add that into our field and we'll give it the name, please upload a copy. And we can also change this name. It doesn't have to be the same as the label. So there's just an example of how the label and the name are a little bit different. That's totally fine. Now, we want to make sure this enable camera is checked. And what that will do is if your user is on their mobile device, their iPad or their mobile phone, they can actually, when they click add files, they'll be able to take a picture with their camera of their vaccination card. So it makes it really easy. There's no printing or scanning or, any copying or any of that business. It's just super easy to get your vaccine card onto this workflow. We're also going to give our file a customized name. So if someone uploads a file, this file name template will just absorb whatever the name of the file was on their device. But we might want to name it something special so that when we save it into our submissions repository or our file system, it has a distinct name. And the way we're going to do this is to use what we call in frevvo a templatized string, which is the name of a control inside a set of curly braces. And this is going to pull runtime data. So When this form is running, we'll capture the first name and the last name, and then we'll put in this static text vaccination card, and that should make it very easy to identify what that file is in our file system. If desired, you could limit the file types. We don't really need to do that for today. All right. So then let's come down to this not vaccinated review section. This is a standard approval section, so that's all working for me. That's fine, but we do want to add in another radio control here. Actually, let's add a checkbox control here. And what we'll do is we'll call this action. And this might be any actions that the person reviewing that non-vaccinated status might want to take. That's going to look different for different businesses, of course. So for today, we'll just put two options, either exemption is confirmed or other. And then we'll add a comment so that if you check other, then we'll pop up a comment box which allows you to enter exactly what action you took. So we'll do that. That looks good. And okay, I think our form is built out now. It's got all the extra controls to meet our business requirements. So let's come back over to the workflow. Now, we only really need to perform this non-vaccinated review step if the person is not vaccinated. So what we'll do is we'll add a precondition so that we dynamically perform this step only if the person is not vaccinated. And this has a really simple interface where we can select the field that we want to act as the condition. We'll say is, and we're going to enter the literal value not vaccinated, which was one of the two options in our dropdown. And then we submit. And just like magic, you see this precondition here. And basically, if that status says not vaccinated at runtime, we're going to perform this step. If it isn't anything else, empty, which it won't be because it's required, or vaccinated, it will come down to this last approval step. We can skip over that. We also wanted some communication to the user at this stage. So let's go ahead and add an email step. Now we can dynamically send this to the email of the employee by using that same templatized string syntax here. And then we can also customize the subject and message using any combination of static text, templatized strings, and HTML markup here. So you can see I'm using a couple little HTML tags here to put in a line break, and I'm calling in the first name from runtime data. We're also going to send along a copy of the PDF and any attachments that the user uploaded. We'll submit that. And you can see again right there on your workflow diagram, you could really use this as a straw man if you wanted to show the business, here's the concept of what the workflow is going to do. You could, use this as a wireframe to show them. So the last thing we're going to do is just a little bit of custom logic over here. So, well, this is the second to last thing we'll do, I should say. So as I mentioned, Frevvo built in a few business rules for us. We're going to edit a couple of these and then we'll add a couple of new rules. So the first rule I want to edit is this initialization rule. Notice that it is setting the My Items section to enabled on the first step and disabled on any other step. I like that model, and so I want to do the same thing with our vaccination details section. So what we'll do is we'll look for the vaccination details section here. We'll say enabled on this step and disabled on any other steps. And that way, once the user has entered their vaccine information, none of the approvers can go back and edit it. It would have to get sent all the way back to this first user if they wanted to edit anything there. And then the other thing I want to look at is we have a couple of rules here that would require and make visible and printable the non-vaccinated review section, that section where we put the checkbox control. That's going to work great, but since we put a precondition on this step, there's a possibility that if we skip this step, we get to that third step, now the section is still visible because technically we are on or after that step. And if that section is visible and printable, it's going to feel a little awkward to this person performing the last step. Why am I seeing this other section? So what we're going to do is just add a second condition. So we have this current step condition. We're going to add a second condition that matches the condition we put in our precondition. And that was not vaccinated. Hopefully I'm spelling stuff right. Spelling is important. There we go. Okay, so now we have made sure that this section on our form will behave the same way as the step. So let's add another business rule here to show or hide that vaccination details section. You only really would need to fill that out if you said, yes, I'm vaccinated. If you say, no, I'm not, we can leave that hidden and not printable. So what we'll do is we'll do another condition based on this vaccination status field. This time we'll use our fully vaccinated value. And if that happens to be true, if the status is fully vaccinated, then we want to set our details to visible, required, and printable. Okay, and then if that's not true, meaning if the person is not vaccinated, then we can let that details be hidden, optional, and also not printable. So it won't even print on the PDF, no confusion at all. Okay. Now we could do a similar show hide rule for the second dose and the booster. So, let's say we know that some vaccines have a second dose and others only have one dose. So what we can do here is we'll run this on a different field, the which vaccine did you receive field. So if this one is Pfizer or Moderna, that was again one of the options that we put into our radio control. Then we want the date of the second dose to be visible. We'll say required and printable. Oops. And then we can also look at that booster in the same rule. You can do multiple controls. You can set multiple controls in a single rule. For this one, we'll just do visible printable because we don't necessarily want to require that booster date. So you can really see how quick and easy it is to use this to set the logic. And as soon as I'm done here, I'll show you what frevvo is doing behind the scenes, is actually creating custom JavaScript for us. And if you wanted to, if you're comfortable in JavaScript, you can always write these rules directly in JavaScript. That's totally fine. And there are some rules maybe that have more complexity or something that you might want to write in JavaScript. For example, if you have a switch case, so if I had 3 options here and I wanted to do a different action on each option, I could do 3 business rules for the 3 different options, or I could do a single JavaScript rule for all the options. So lots of availability there. You can even start in the rule builder and then switch over to code and let frevvo do at least part of the work for you. So here's a little bit of what that behind the scenes code looks like. But again, I was able to do all of that through the UI, no code required. Now let's add one final rule here. Let's validate the date of that first dose, make sure it's after today. We don't want someone putting a date in the future. And for this, we're going to use one of the built-in expressions that frevvo offers. We'll use the today expression. So when I start typing today, I get a list of functions here, and I can just click that. And this, with the closed brackets, is going to pull the current date. So it will compare the date that's entered in first dose to today. And if that date is after today, we want to set the date of first dose to invalid. So we want to throw up a little warning message for the user. And I can even customize that warning message to give it some meaningful text here. So we'll say, please enter a date today or earlier. And then otherwise, we'll set date of first dose to valid. Okay, so we've just done all that custom logic really in just minutes using point and click tools, which is, I think, pretty cool. It makes it a lot faster to get forms and workflows right into production. Now, let's take a quick look at workflow settings. This will be the last piece of the puzzle here. We can do a number of different customizations to our entire workflow. There's lots of settings here, and let's just set a couple of them on this that are important to us. One is we probably want to save a PDF of this workflow. This will get saved in our submissions repository, and we can give that file a custom name, just like we named the upload file earlier with any combination of static and dynamic text. So here I'm pulling in the last name and first name from the form submission, and then proof of vaccination, and then a date. Now, I also want to just take a quick look at the access control. Right now, I have who can start the workflow set to anyone. You may want to set it to authenticated users to make sure that our business rule, which will automatically capture their information, to make sure that works for them. That's going to work as long as they're a logged in user. So what we can do is sort of force them to log in before they access this form, and that way we know we have all their information. We can also specify a particular user that we want to be able to administer the workflow, so they'll be able to search for tasks and modify them, reset them if somebody's out on PTO, that sort of thing. And we can also customize other access control, like who can view and edit submissions, who can help collaborate on the workflow. So lots of options there. We're also going to set a couple of searchable fields. Searchable fields will show up in our submission table, and they will also allow us to search for submissions. So we can search by any of these fields that I'm moving from the left column to the right column, and we'll see them in our submissions table in just exactly this order. And then finally, let's make sure we send the user an email after the workflow is completely approved. So we've already sent them an email to kind of confirm their submission. Now we want to let them know that the vaccination was, or status was reviewed and approved. So again, we'll use pretty much very similar properties, almost exactly the same properties as we did in our email in the workflow. It's a combination of static and dynamic text and HTML markup, and then we'll send a PDF and attachments. Now notice that there's lots of other places you could send your documents if you wanted to send it over to Google Drive or your file system or your SharePoint. Any of these connectors can work with frevvo, so you can integrate with your existing systems and make this really seamless for your end users. Okay, so this workflow is now ready to go, fully functioning. We'll just dive in and we'll take a quick look at how our business rules are working there. I'm not going to run this one all the way through because I want to show you some other cool stuff. But you can see if I say I'm not vaccinated, no details. If I say I'm fully vaccinated, there's my vaccination details. Of course, Pfizer and Moderna, we have second dose and booster. Johnson & Johnson, we don't see that. So everything seems to be working great here. So what we would do is we would test that all the way through, and then we could just share it right to our users. It's ready to go in literally 30 minutes or less. And a lot of that was me talking, so you could probably do it faster if you weren't yammering on like I am. So let's come out of this workflow, and I want to show you a finished version of this workflow that I built yesterday. Now this has just a little bit more design time on it, maybe an hour instead of a half an hour, and it has a couple of other nice features. So one feature I want to share with you is this quick approval. So you can imagine if you have hundreds of employees, whoever's doing this last approval step is going to get a lot of tasks. So what we've done is enabled quick approval, which is going to allow them to approve tasks with one click, and they'll get just enough information that they need, the name of the employee and their vaccination status. They don't necessarily need to know or care about all the dates and the which vaccine and all that in order to approve this workflow. I've also added a webhook here, which sends my data over to a Google Sheet. Now, this particular webhook is going to send my non-vaccinated data over to a Google Sheet for weekly testing. So only users who express that they're not vaccinated will end up on this weekly testing sheet. I've also added under settings a document action to send my data over to Google Sheets. So this document action happens at the end of the workflow, and it will send all of my data over to this vaccinated status. So I'll have a list of all my employees with their status. And I could, anything you can do with Google Sheets, you could do here. So I could add a cool pie graph that shows me the percent of my employees that have reported in, or the percent that are vaccinated. So it's a really nice integration option there. Now, if you look at my form, I've also added a few other bells and whistles here. So we've added some additional vaccination statuses. So I've got some switch cases where if you're scheduled, you're going to see this date of scheduled. And I've also added a few other vaccination options. And I've also made this upload control required. So the way I did that is to set the minimum to 1. And then in a business rule, I can make sure that that minimum goes back to 0 if we're not going to be filling out this, this part of the workflow. Okay, so what we're going to do, let me see, did I tell you everything I wanted to show you? Oh, and the other thing that's kind of fun on here is I've set a dynamic pending message. So if you're vaccinated, you're going to see one message after you click continue. And if you're not vaccinated, you'll see a different message. And it basically says, hey, somebody has to do an extra review on this, maybe expect to hear from them for a conversation. So let's run this workflow, and I'm actually going to run it from over here. This is a frevvo space, which is basically a little website where you can post all of your frevvo forms, give your users access to these forms, and they can also have access to other things like their task list, their account information, etc. So let's run this proof of vaccination form here, and we'll run the first one. We'll say we're fully vaccinated. We'll go ahead and put in some dates. If I was confused here, I could always say, oh yeah, okay, that's scheduled, great. We could say our booster date is scheduled in the future, and then we'll upload a copy of that vaccination card. Again, I'm showing you the desktop version here. If I was, where did I put my vaccination card? There it is. If I was on a mobile device, I could just take a picture with my camera and upload it right away. So we can now see that that's uploaded, right? And we'll go ahead and click continue. And now I happen to have set this workflow up so that I can perform all of the steps, and that just helps it go a little faster for the demo. But you can also see that the user would get an email reminding them to do this, and with a link to perform it. All right, now I am going to pop over to my email real quick because I want to show you that Maya here got an email. This is that custom email with the attachment for her records. And the proof of vaccination, here's another little bell and whistle I did, is I have put a message on this that says, this submission is pending approval. So this is your proof that you submitted it, but you couldn't use this as proof that it's approved because it has this nice message on it. And then of course you have any attachments that you added as well. All right, back over to our workflow. We'll go ahead and approve this, sign this section. And this is an example of that PKI encrypted legally binding signature. I clicked this and it's using my logged in user data to do a name and date stamp. It'll tell me digitally signed, identity verified, and also show me a unique ID. And then you can see it's locking down all this data. So I can't go back in and edit data unless I unsign it. And then we'll click finish. And if we come look in our vaccination tracker, we can see that that is that submission came right through to our Google Sheet automatically, just instantly. All right, so now I am just going to pop out of here. I'm going to log in as a different user. Let's see. Give me just one moment, guys. Sorry about that. I have too many windows open. Okay, so now I'm going to show my screen again, and I'm now in as a user happens to be named Trevor. And I'm just going to run this form as Trevor. Kind of came out of my space there, that's all right. And for this user, let's set our vaccination status to vaccination scheduled. So we can set the date it's scheduled for. We can say we're not planning to do this till next year sometime. And now Trevor gets this manager will review notice, right? So a special custom pending message. And what we can do is go back in as that designer, that user that performs step 2 and 3, maybe. Okay, and now on my task list, I can see this proof of vaccination from Trevor. I can see a nice custom message here that shows me exactly what I'm approving. And I can run that flow. If I check other, I can maybe say like, counseling scheduled date confirmed, and we'll put them on the weekly testing list. So we're going to sign the section, click continue, and then we'll come over here to our vaccination tracker and see now that Trevor is showing up on our weekly testing list. I also can see, because I happen to be, this next step is also assigned to the same user, I can see that this step is now available, and I have this double play arrow. This is that quick view I was mentioning. So I can do a quick view. I can see this summary information all set, and I could just click approve to approve it, or I could reject it back, or I can click details to see the entire workflow if I wanted to look into it closer. And again, same kind of digital signature. We'll finish that up, and then we can see in our tracker that Trevor is now here with his vaccination status as well. So kind of cool stuff there. Let me go back into our space. And let's see, oh, something happened to my picture. Sorry about that. So let's come back into our space and we'll see what other forms we have that you might be interested in if you're managing COVID-19 pandemic processes in your business. So we just did the proof of vaccination. Another one that a lot of folks are starting to go back to their in-person offices. So what you may want to do is screen your employees for risk factors before they show up on site. So what we do is we have a message control here that asks them, are they experiencing any symptoms? And if they say yes, and confirm that, it gives them a special message that says, okay, you need to go home immediately and contact human resources. And, kind of lets them know what to do there. Then if we run that form again, and let's say we don't have any symptoms, we click no, we confirm that, then we get a success message and we say, great, go ahead and punch in. I could redirect them on the submit button. I could redirect them to the company homepage or the portal where they're going to access the rest of their forms. So that sort of allows them to go ahead and start work. And again, you can collect all that information in a Google Sheet or send it to SharePoint, whatever you need to do. Now, for folks that need regular testing, we have a couple of testing consent forms. This one is designed for students. It collects the parent's name and student's name and then gets a parent signature. This is, again, that anonymous signature, so you could keep this form up on your website and let parents access it even if they don't happen to be logged into your frevvo system. And we have a similar one for staff. Now, this one, your staff are more likely to be your frevvo users, so you might want to use a different, more of a legally binding digital signature like we showed earlier. So we could easily update this template to that if we needed to. An issue report can be very helpful if you want to give folks a place to report a diagnosis and exposure, maybe voice a concern about your policies or ask a question, and you can collect those details. And then this one I'm actually quite proud of. This is a newer template that we just put out a couple of weeks ago, contact tracing workflow. So for this, what we do is we enter the name of a person who maybe tested positive or for whatever reason has some symptoms. We need to do some contact tracing. We can say the date of the onset, so when their symptoms started, and frevvo will automatically calculate the contact tracing date 2 days back from that. And then we can list the contacts. So let's say, Trevor had contact with them maybe on the 5th, put in a phone number. And this is dynamic, so I can add as many contacts as I want. So maybe I had contact as well. And then we click continue. Now, again, I have this set up so that I can perform all the steps, but usually probably someone else would perform the second step. And on this step, we're going to go ahead and call each of the contacts. Now, I actually have included a nice script, like a call script that the person can use, link to CDC communication guidelines, all kinds of helpful stuff. And as they call each person, they're going to call them and they're going to check off whether they had a symptom or not. If they're symptomatic or they have a positive test, then they'll get a link to start a new contact tracing form. And that new form will get pre-filled in with all of that contacts information. So it makes it a lot easier to do the next step of your contact tracing, follow the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, as you will. So that's very cool. And then, of course, there's a review step that we won't show today, but you could review all of the contact tracing and then save that into your submissions. And the last one I want to show you, this is one that our team did for a sort of like a hackathon, a form building contest. And what this does is it actually replaces a CDC government form that is, it's in I think a fillable PDF format, but you sort of have to print it, fill it, scan it, upload it. Some of the CDC stuff is even in Excel format. These things are just really challenging to build into your process. So what we've done is we've taken that PDF form and we've created a frevvo form. This one is accessible, which is why you see the icons and the little alert arrows. So this will work great with a screen reader for users that have disabilities. And it basically uses a lot of the same custom logic and features that I showed you earlier to make this form much, much easier to fill out than the CDC version, we think anyway. So you guys are going to get from Ashish, I think, a link to be able to test out all those forms and templates that you can use in your own tenant, in your own business if you want to. All you have to do is customize it with a new logo and maybe a few other little changes, and it's super easy. So at this point, I'd love to see if we have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Megan. That was great. Yes, we will be putting these templates out in sort of a format where you can try them out. Probably absent the Google Sheets integration for the time being, right? I assume, Megan, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. Well, we don't have a lot of questions, and in fact, they're all about pricing.
Ah,
So,
okay.
uh, I guess basically, is there any cost for digital signatures?
No, the
I don't
digital
think so, right?
signatures built right in. That comes with every frevvo subscription. Yep,
Okay, so there's no basically there's no additional cost. You don't need to worry about how many people sign or how many times a document is signed or how many documents are signed, right?
exactly right.
And one thing I guess you didn't mention here also, maybe worth noting, is that um, you can also create these forms and workflows. Many customers do create them where you collect the signature from the user just once and you can transfer it to multiple documents from a single form or workflow, correct? I think you have,
Yes, we can do that in frevvo if you have a, for example, an employee onboarding workflow. Instead of signing every single document in that workflow where, you might have a W-4 and an I-9 and a health insurance form, you can collect one signature and map it through to all the different documents.
right. Okay, and the other question is very almost identical. Is there any cost or limit on the portal? I think the space that you showed. Again, the answer is no.
No, yeah,
So,
spaces are also built in.
okay. And we only have one more question, which is again related to pricing. What is the price? What does this cost? So I guess that's something that we'll follow up individually on.
Okie doke,
We
sounds
go.
good.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thank you very much, Megan. Thanks everybody for attending. Hopefully you found it useful. If you have any questions, you can reach us. You know where to reach us. The email address on the screen is, or there's a contact form on our website as well. And we appreciate your time. Thanks.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
Megan.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Ashish.
Bye.
Bye-bye.